Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 18, Zimbabwe, we are going to discuss Zimbabwe's economic development policies 1991 to 2001. In 1980s, Zimbabwe embarked on a program of post-war reconstruction, which was supported by some foreign donors. In general terms, the reconstruction was successful as the economy was recapitalized and reintegrated into the world economy. During the past 2 decades, Zimbabwe undertook several economic reform programs. In October 1990, the Zimbabwe government succumbed to Western donor pressure and agreed to implement the 5-year Economic Structural Adjustment Program (ESAP) as a response to the economic crisis which had been afflicting the country since 1980s. The measures introduced were removal of price controls, removal of wage controls, reduction of government expenditure, a 40% devaluation of the Zimbabwean dollar, removal of the subsidies on basic consumer goods, liberalizing the foreign currency allocation system, removal of protection of non-productive import, substituting industries and increased profit remittance abroad, and a radical restructuring of the various terrestrial and other public enterprises. Subsequently, in early 1991, the Zimbabwean government announced the framework for economic reforms 1991 to 1995, which set out a time frame for reducing support to parastatal organization. The objective was the implementation of programs for improving efficiency and management, as well as commercialization and privatization of public enterprises. Furthermore, in 1998, the Zimbabwe government launched the second stage of its Economic Structural Adjustment Program, the Zimbabwe Program for Economic and Social Transformation. ZIMPREST outlined microeconomic reforms through to the year 2000. The plan envisaged a real annual GDP growth of 6% until 2000 and a creation of 44,000 new jobs per year. To achieve such targets, savings and investments were expected to reach at least 23% of the GDP and the budget deficit reduced to fewer than 5%. ZIMPREST also sought improvements in the quality of democratic institutions, the pursuit of good governance, and the elimination of corruption. Thus, political conditionalities were added to ZIMPREST. Now let us move to the next point, impact of economic structural adjustment policies, macroeconomic crisis. Since 1991, the Zimbabwean dollar has been devalued repeatedly, and after the crisis that started with the land restitution process has become almost worthless. The generous liberalization of the economy culminated in the lifting of protectionism. This opened the door of domestic industry to cheaper import and resulted in the closing and downsizing of many labor-intensive industries. South Africa's decision to impose a tariff on Zimbabwe's textile export exacerbated the situation. The severe droughts in the country significantly affected agricultural output, which is the main source of foreign currency. Thus, between 1991 and the year 2001, Zimbabwe's GDP declined, culminating in a negative growth of minus 11.5%. Values of the trade relations with South Africa. Zimbabwe is South Africa's largest trading partner on the continent. The country largely exports primarily goods to South Africa and is dependent on South Africa for fuel and electricity. The trading balance is in favor of South African exports of mainly manufactured products to Zimbabwe. South Africa's protectionism ensures that the Zimbabwe's goods remain less competitive in South Africa, and this has also contributed to downturn in the latter's economy in the 1990s. Now let us discuss the next point, which is unemployment. Unemployment is rampant and an exodus of young skilled professionals has been in progress for many years now, with South Africa, Britain, North America and even Australia being the preferred destinations. Economic policy reforms have thus resulted in declining employment opportunities. The fact that Zimbabwe is facing a rapidly increasing unemployment crisis is evident in the percentage drop of the total population formally employed, which dropped from 18% in 1965 to 112% in 1996. Now let us discuss the next point, which is increased poverty. The income distribution in Zimbabwe is still one of the most unequal in the world. A survey on consumption shows that while the rate of consumption among the richest 20% of the country's population is 55.7, the poorest 20% constitute only 4.6%. The incidence of poverty has increased in Zimbabwe as a result of ESAP. The poverty assessment study undertaken by the Zimbabwe government in 1995 indicated that 62% of the population was living in poverty. According to the report, 42% of the population belonged to households which were below the food poverty line, and 62% of the population belonged to households whose incomes were adequate to meet basic needs. In addition, the report indicated that incidence of poverty was higher in rural areas where 72% of households had incomes below the total consumption poverty line compared to 46% in urban areas. Now the next point is political dissatisfaction. Cutbacks in public expenditure entailed the end of many public subsidies, set in motion the introduction of user fees for education and health, and meant that the poor could not afford these crucial amenities. This, coupled with high inflation, rising cost of living and the decline in real wages, resulted in not only widespread poverty but also disillusionment with the present ZANU-FP regime. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.